Hello again, SPC family, and thank you for joining me online here as we look at God's Word together. As we get started, I just want to encourage you that our God is at work, and I would ask you to maybe just ponder the question, how has God been at work in your life this past week? As you think about maybe the goal that you set last week, how did that go? How did God come and work in you and through you as you pursued that goal? Our God is a good God who loves us. He sent His Son for us, and He calls us and makes us His people as we trust in Jesus Christ. And so He is at work. And I just want to remind us, there are about 90,000 people between St. Thomas and Tillsonburg who are far from Christ. And we need to be going with the gospel of Jesus Christ to them, sharing who Jesus is and seeing God work and draw people to Himself. Last week, as we gathered online here for some teaching, we talked about the command of participating in communion. And we said that communion is for Jesus' disciples, and it's for Jesus' disciples to recall with tangible substances the significance of Jesus' sacrifice, His death in our place, and it's for Jesus' disciples to identify with this new covenant people, this people of God who we are. We also said that if we're going to participate in communion, we should be living out the significance of what communion does represent. And so last week we talked about communion. This week we're going to be talking about something new. And this week we're kind of talking about a sensitive subject, and all parts of our life are impacted by our walk with Christ and being a disciple of Jesus. And so this really shouldn't come as a surprise to us, but also our finances are impacted by our walk with Christ. And so today we're going to address the question or try to answer the question of how can we manage our money in a God-honoring way. And I really just want to zero in on one practice because I think it helps us set the tone for all of our finances. And the one practice is appropriate giving. If we go back into the Old Testament, into Malachi chapter 3, verse 3 to 8, God actually calls out His people, the Israelites, because they have not been giving to Him. The text says they've been robbing Him by not giving tithes and contributions. And He encourages them to bring in the full tithe, that there may be food in His house. And thereby, God says, put me to the test, if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you a blessing until there is no more need. And so we see in Malachi chapter 3, verse 8 to 10, that God did expect His people in the Old Testament to be giving to Him these tithes and these contributions. And these tithes and these contributions, what they were used for, and you can read about this in texts like Numbers chapter 18 verse 21 or Deuteronomy 14, 28 to 29, what these tithes and contributions were used for was to meet the needs of the Levites, who were the tribe in Israel, who were set aside to serve in the temple and to meet the spiritual needs of the people of Israel. So they didn't have a regular portion like all the other tribes of land that they could work to be able to produce what they needed to survive. And so this tithe and these contributions, they were made to the temple, they were made to God, and they were supposed to meet the needs of the tribe of the Levites. The other use of these tithes and these offerings was to provide for the needy in society, that those who were widows or orphans or even just people who were foreigners in the land who didn't have anything of their own possession, these tithes and contributions were supposed to be brought out every 3 years and distributed to those who are in need. And so you can see why this tithes and these contributions were important. And God did expect His people in the Old Testament to give Him tithes and contributions, to honor him with their giving, to honor him with their finances, with their giving. In the New Testament, this expectation to give is actually carried on. And we see in many different teachings in the New Testament and actually many different actions of the early church in the New Testament. For example, in Matthew chapter 6, verse 1 to 4, Jesus explains to his disciples that they will give. He actually uses this term, when you give. Here's the expectation. It's not if you give or, when you feel like giving, but it's when you give to the needy. When you give to the needy, and Jesus teaches them not to make a big deal out of it, not to showboat with their giving, but they just give to the needy in secret and before God in heaven. But the expectation is this: Jesus' disciples will give to the needy. Another example is in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 13 to 14, where Paul is teaching the church about gospel ministers, people who are dedicating their whole lives to serving the church through proclaiming the message of Jesus Christ. And he likens the Old Testament provision for the Levites with Jesus' command that New Testament gospel ministers should be provided for. And so the implication then would be that as Christians, or as Jesus' disciples, we are contributing to the church's ministry. And so in the Old Testament, we have this precedent where God does expect his people to give and to provide for the needy and for those who are serving in the temple. And in the New Testament, we see this expectation carried on, where Jesus' disciples give again to provide for the needy, and again to provide for those who are full-time ministers in the church, and to provide for that church's ministry. All right, well, let's go back to Malachi chapter 3, verse 8 to 10, because there's a really neat promise there. God promises that as his people give, he will pour out blessings until there is no more need. Well, in the New Testament, God continues to promise to his people that he will pour out blessing until there is no more need. And this takes place in two ways. The first way, in Luke chapter 12, verse 29 to 31, we see that God promises to meet the needs of his people as his people seek his kingdom, as they seek his truth going out and the gospel of Jesus Christ going out, and as they seek his righteousness in their life to be living it out, and as they seek his kingdom even in their giving. What God promises is that their needs will be met. Now, it's very important that we understand these are needs being met, not greeds, not things that maybe we just want or desire, but God promises to give us what we need exactly at the right moment, at the right time. As his people seek his kingdom, he will meet their needs. In 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 6 to 10, we have another expression of God blessing. We have this promise in 2 Corinthians 9, verse 6 to 10, as Paul is teaching the church. He teaches them that God will increase their gospel ministry impact through giving. That as the church gives, that the message of Jesus Christ is going to go out more and more, and that they're going to see a greater harvest of people getting saved and coming to Christ. And this happens as they sacrificially give to the gospel ministry. And so we have this blessing. Now, these aren't earthly blessings. These aren't, right, the promise if you give, then your bank account is going to grow. No, this is just simply the blessing of God is going to meet your needs, and he's going to expand his kingdom as we give. And that is, as a disciple of Jesus, the promise of God's blessing in our life. So let's go to a story and see giving in action. In Mark chapter 12, verse 41 and 44, we have a story here. We read, Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people putting money into the offering box. Many rich people put in large sums, and a poor widow came and put in two small copper coins, which make a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, Truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. For they all contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on. There's a couple of neat things happening in this story, but I just want to mention maybe three. The first one is we can see clearly that God sees and knows and understands the intent and the heart of the giver. Jesus sees this widow and he sees that she is giving all that she has to God. God sees the heart. We also see from this story that some people don't have a proper heart when they give. Some people are just giving out of their abundance, or they are not giving with a heart that is truly dedicated to God. But this widow completely trusted God, as she was even led to give all that she had. Well, what do we need to learn, or what do we need to do? And I think this is the third thing, that we need to ask ourselves, when we give, do we give with a heart that is completely trusting God with all the money that we have? Or do we have some other kind of motivation? Are we just giving to feel good, or maybe to look good, to check a box on the Christian to-do list? When we give, do we still think of some of the money that we have as ours? You know, I'll give this amount of money and that's God's, and then the rest I get to do with it however I please. Or do we really trust God with all the money that we have, just like this widow? You know, when we start changing our mindset and changing the way we think about money, it changes our giving. And our giving really reflects our mindset about money. You know, if we think all of what we have ultimately belongs to God, then when we see somebody in need, it's easy to reach into our pockets and to meet those needs. In fact, it's really easy to start praying, God, show me somebody I can bless with what you have provided to me. And we start looking for ways that we can share with others and help the needy and further God's kingdom. Well, let's summarize all this in maybe 3 principles. The first principle is that Jesus' disciples give in order to further the ministry of Jesus. Jesus came to seek and to save the lost. And that's what we're supposed to be all about. And so we give oftentimes to our local church in order to further this ministry that Jesus has for us. The second principle is that when Jesus' disciples honor God with their giving, they can trust that God will provide and meet their needs, and that God will increase gospel impact. And our third principle is that Jesus' disciples seek to have hearts that completely trust God with all the money that they have. Well, what's a goal you could set this week as you think about your finances, as you think about your giving as a disciple of Jesus? I would encourage you to evaluate your heart. You know, take some time this week and prayerfully consider how you view your finances. What does your giving say about how you view your finances? I would also challenge you, maybe you can ask God this week, who is one person that you can meet the need of with what God has blessed you? You know, prayerfully every day ask God, God, show me somebody that I can just pour out, reach into my pockets and meet their needs. And finally, maybe there's just somebody you need to share Jesus with. You know, you have been given the best treasure, life in Christ. And so who could you share Jesus with this week? Well, church, as we wrap up our time together, thank you so much for tuning in and talking and listening just to this sensitive topic about money and our finances. And if you're listening and you're not a follower of Jesus Christ, please do not take this as me encouraging you to give to the church. That's not what this is about. This is for disciples of Jesus and how we want to view our money, how we want to see God's kingdom expanded here on earth as we proclaim the message of Jesus and take the gospel and the truth of Jesus to as many people as possible. Well, thank you again for watching. God bless and have a good week.